Previous lecture we discussed the early stages of language acquisition. In this lecture we're going to discuss the later stages. What happens after the child has entered school? What happens after the child has acquired a good number of vocabulary items, and now it is time to enter school and to learn more about language? What happens in the later stages of language acquisition? So in this lecture we are going to discuss discourse ability, meta-linguistic awareness, and second language acquisition. So we have two major parts in this lecture. The first is about later stages of language acquisition, in which we are going to discuss discourse ability and meta-linguistic awareness. And the second part we have second language acquisition. So now let's move to the first part of the lecture, which is later stages of language acquisition. What happens after the child has entered school? The child starts to develop discourse ability, the ability to have a discourse with another, the ability to start to take turns. So children can take turns in conversations and maintain a topic over a limited number of conversational turns. So at this age, children start to begin serious conversations at around the age of 8 years to 9 years. They start to develop the ability to have a conversation with someone about a certain topic. People acquire a mature ability to converse for the exchange of information in late childhood. So at this age, which is early years of school, they start to acquire a beginning ability, a mature ability. It's not developed, well developed yet. They are not able to discuss a serious topic which can be, for example, displayed on a television. It is still the beginning, a mature ability to converse for the exchange of information in late childhood. Communication skills are mastered at different ages. So as you know, different people have different communicational skills. They start to acquire communication skills in different ages. Some people can start to have good communication skills at the age of 10, and some people can have start to acquire communication skills at a later age, such as 15, and some people are old, but they are not able to communicate well with others. So communication skills are mastered at different ages. So in later stages, as you perhaps noticed, that now we started to have different levels of acquisition. In the early stages, almost all children are alike. They start to acquire language with approximately the same pace. But here, in late stages, we start to have different abilities and different stages of acquisition. Some people acquire faster than others. When we talk about communication skills, when we talk about the ability to converse or to exchange information, then people start to have differences. Difference in communication skills can also be found across adult speakers of a language. So even adults have different communication skills, as perhaps you're aware of that. This is a fact, and different people, including adults, we're not talking about children anymore. We are talking about adults who have different communicational abilities. Okay, meta-linguistic awareness. What do we mean by meta-linguistic awareness? At a later stage of acquisition, of language acquisition, people become aware that language is not just a means of communication, but also an object. So at an early age, children think of language as a way of communication. When they want something, they start to use language as a way of communication. But at a later stage, people start to understand and start to look at language as an object which can be studied. For example, we can study the phonology of language. It is not just a form of communication. It is more than that. It is an object. It is an object which can be studied. We can study the phonological units of language. We can study the prosody of language. We can study the intonation, the stress in a language. So people at an early and at a later age, students, when they are students, when they are in a later age, they start to understand that language is not just a form of communication. It is an object which can be studied on its own. There are similarities between first and second language. Now we are discussing second language acquisition. There are similarities between first and second language acquisition. So what do we mean by second language acquisition? After someone has completed his first language acquisition, he has acquired his first language fully, and he wants to learn another language such as English or French. This is called second language. So for the majority of you, or perhaps for all of you, English is a second language. You have acquired English after the completion of the acquisition of Arabic. What happens in the acquisition of the second language? Researchers have found that there are similarities between first and second language acquisition. And of course there are differences. One of the differences is that second language acquisition has its own limitations. What do we mean by limitations? It is not complete. It has limitations. It is limited. For example, people acquire a second language with a slower pace. So there is a slower pace of acquisition as compared to first language acquisition. There's something called, so the pace, when we compare a child acquiring, for example, his first language, Arabic, and when we compare an Arab who learns English, who is in the process of the acquisition of English, the pace of acquisition in children is much faster than adults. So a child can acquire Arabic, who's acquiring Arabic as a first language, he can acquire it in 2 years or so. Okay? But for the adult, it might take him ages to acquire the language, and after attempts to acquire the language, the acquisition stops in what we call ultimate attainment. If you have studied English for 10 years, or for 15 years, or for 20 years, you are going to stop at a level. The number of years you are learning will not affect your ability. If you study for 10 or 20 or 30 years, if you keep studying English for 30 years, you're not going to become like natives. Of course, we have this is not for all people. We have exclusions. We have people who acquire a second language and they become just like native speakers. But for the vast majority of people, something called ultimate attainment happens. What do we mean by ultimate attainment? The acquisition of the second language stops somewhere. It doesn't continue, and the second language learners do not become just like native speakers. All right? So as we have now completed the lecture, let's have the exercise. People start to develop discourse ability in their late childhood. This includes, so in their late childhood, people or children have start to develop discourse ability. This includes taking turns in conversations, crying to express anger, laughing to express joy, or none of the previous is correct. Okay, now I'm going to give you some time to read all the choices and to choose which one is correct. The answer is A, because at this later stage children are able to speak. It is not time to cry in order to express anger. It is not the time to laugh in order to express joy, because they are able to communicate verbally. They are able to speak. So at this age they start to develop discourse ability, and one of the discourse abilities they develop is taking turns in conversations. Thanks very much for listening to the lecture, and see you in the next lecture. Thank you.